So today we are going to be talking about this article that caught my attention. It was published by The Guardian back in April earlier this year in the springtime by Daniel Dillon Ray. And the title is The Working Class Can't Afford It, the shocking truth about the money bands make on tour. And it's really caught my attention because there seems to be an illusion of what goes on behind the scenes of a band and the metrics and the cost. And also, when you're in a position where perhaps you're smaller on the food chain, there's an assumption that the bands, perhaps a bit further on in their journey, are really quids in. I mean, the Straits are extremely fortunate. We've recently opened for the Buzzcocks, and we have Gilfest next month, as well as haven't opened for the Spiral Carpets and Blue Tones, as you can see by the clobber on the walls. But we'll get straight into this article. As Taylor Swift tops $1 billion in tour revenue, musicians playing smaller venues are facing pitfall fees and frequent losses should the state step in to save our live music scene. When you see a band playing to thousands of fans in a sun-drenched festival field, signing a record deal with a major label, playing endlessly from the airwaves, it's easy to conjure an image of success that comes with serious cash to boot, particularly when Taylor Swift has broken $1 billion in revenue for her current Eras tour. But looks can be deceiving. Quote, I don't blame the public for seeing a band playing to 2,000 people and thinking they're minted, says artist manager Dan Potts, but the reality is quite different. Of course, in regards to the ladder, people like Taylor Swift who have, well over 15 years in this industry and sort of was established in the sort of the last days of the CD era and when people still bought records on iTunes and when the change of format to streaming is now dominant. To new bands coming up and artists, obviously, when you're playing to smaller venues and local venues, the metrics and things alike are going to be vastly different in comparison. I don't think that's particularly a fair comparison, but we'll carry on anyway. Post-COVID, there has been a significant focus on grassroots music venues as they struggle to stay open. There's been less focus on the actual ability of artists to tour these venues. David Martin, Chief Executive Officer of the Featured Artists Coalition, the FAC, says we're in inverted commas cost of touring crisis. Well, we are in a cost of living crisis. I mean, interest rates are going up, inflation is going up. People are holding on to their pounds, and I think it can be felt in all industries, but especially the sort of live music scene, because is attendance as much as it used to be, pre the pandemic, and especially in regards to the rising cost of tour tickets. Pretty much every cost attached to touring, van hire, crew, travel, accommodation, food and drink has gone up, while fees and audiences often have not. Playing live is becoming financially unsustainable for many artists, he says. Artists are seeing playing live as a loss leader now. That's if they can afford to make it work in the first place. Now, there's a lot of bands, the Straits included, that are regional. We are based in Portsmouth and Southampton. That is our sort of fortress. That is our strong sort of place to be, our backyard, so to speak. And many bands, it's a risk for them to go out of their area and play places in bigger cities like Manchester and London, unless you have sort of a significant industry interest or lots of listeners or a following to actually, facilitate you going to these venues. Excuse me. Potts, who works at Red Light Management, home to everyone from Sabrina Carpenter to Kaiser Chiefs, feels like there's an industry equivalent of the Spider-Man meme. in which they're all pointing to one another. People who work at labels think bands make loads of money touring, while booking agents think they make loads of money on publishing, and so on, he says. Everyone thinks artists make money from other side of the industry they're not involved in. Artists are the biggest employers in the industry. They pay for the tour, in a sense, the manager, session musicians, agent, crew, insurance, travel accommodation, equipment, rehearsal space, production, everything. I don't think people know this, all this stuff that the artist pays for. You know, and that's excluding stuff like PR and, promotion. There's lots of hidden costs, and especially when you're trying to work the financial viability of a band. Um, if you want to have £5,000 from music, start with 10, because the Straits, we've all put money into this to, so far get our 9 releases out, and really try and push our band. And a band like this, this artist that is included in this article, English teacher, from Leeds, goes on to say this, quote, "Greater transparency is needed," says Lily Fontaine, lead singer of Leeds band English Teacher. On paper, the four-piece appear to have made it. They are signed with a major label, Ireland, have played on Later with Jules Holland, get healthy BBC Radio 6 music airplay. Their debut album has received 5-star reviews, and they are about to embark on their biggest tour to date, which includes an 800 capacity hometown show. I mean, that's great. I mean, those are massively significant in regards to credentials and achievements with the band. And I've listened to English Teacher. I really, really do like what they have. Unorthodox, unique, and I do recommend you check out their music and perhaps support their creative endeavor. The reality is it's normal for all these achievements to coexist alongside being on universal credit, living at home, or sofa surfing, says Fontaine. During the making of their debut album, she and bandmate Lewis Whiting did the latter unable to afford rent. I mean, that's tough. I mean, as I said like earlier, when there is this illusion when you sign with a major label that it's going to cure all your problems. Once you get once you get signed, you think that you can just put your feet up, but that's when the hard work for a band actually starts to begin. Just getting there is a challenge in itself, but to actually sort of maintain any sort of significant momentum and progress is extremely taxing. And you've got to remember as well that you're in a situation where you've put your heart and soul into something, especially if you're a creative and you're doing something and you've gotten this far. It really takes a strong foundation for a band to have good people around them as well. In the 4 years of existence, English Teacher have yet to turn a profit from touring. Whew. We've never directly paid ourselves from a gig, says Whiting. A headlining tour usually comes out with a deficit. The only thing that we ever make any kind of profit on is festivals, because the fees can be higher, but any money left over just goes towards the next outgoings. Yeah, even at our level, any money that goes in goes straight out on something else. Whether that be sort of illustration designs for t-shirts, or PR, or a music video, something. There's always a cost. Photographs, they're necessary, especially when they're up to date and you're trying to constantly present yourself on social media in a professional light. A successful show for the group in the past has been defined by whether they can flog enough merch for a supermarket food shop. Blimey. I mean, you really, as other creatives, you really want other people to do well. I know it's cliche to say this, um, but when the tide rises, all ships rise, or something along those lines. Anyway, I'm probably butchering the quote, but so how do they survive In the world of artists, we are in a lucky position, says Whiting. We try and pay ourselves £500 a month each from the band pot. So that's 2 grand. However, they've been reliant on their advance for this, which I would be fascinated to know what that is. Um, are the advances as as extravagant as they once were? I highly doubt it, but that's just piquing my curiosity. It doesn't really have that isn't really a necessary detail in the article, which is now gone. We're now in a stage where we're going to have to figure out where that £500 a month is coming from, says Fontaine, because the gig fees won't be able to cover that. The band estimate that a 16-date UK tour in the May would generate roughly £800 profit, but says Fontaine, realistically, I don't think there'll be any profit. I don't think there'll be any profit because things always go over budget. Oh baby, that's I mean, the reality of the situation is what are they spending their money on? But life gets in the way. Perhaps you need to pay for things that are unexpected. For many artists, fees aren't increasing in line with costs. There's been no real incline at all, says Potts, for support slots. I don't think the fees have changed in the last 10 years or so that I've been managing, whether that's £50 at a smaller venue or 500 quid for some of the biggest shows. Yeah, I mean, we've been paid, um, uh, well, at least we've been paid for our support slots. I won't say what amount, but it goes towards the band, and you're thinking the next recording session. I do know a band when I spoke to their management that supported a #1 multi-platinum British band on tour, and they were paid only a few £100s, and that really took me by surprise because you just think there's this big sort of money tree that the big bands are owning thousands of pounds, but I guess their costs equal that as well. So this band in particular lost thousands of pounds on this support slot and on this tour, and that really sort of changed my perspective. And that's why I think articles like this are not only is it a superb article, but they're like gold dust, because it really does give you an insight into the current situation of this industry we are in. Fees for headline shows can vary enormously for bands, even on the same tour. Playing a 200 capacity club in Newcastle may land you £600, while a 1,500 cap in London may net you 3 grand. I mean, obviously, if you're playing to more people, if you're playing to 1,500 people, you're going to earn more money than a 200 capacity venue. That goes without saying, but I suppose the travel costs are included in that, and fewer people are coming to shows at the small to mid-size end of things. Quote, in our audience data, we see there's a gap in new audiences coming through post-pandemic. Now, we cannot diminish the effect that it had on especially live music venues, as well as other sort of social settings, whether that be restaurants and theatres. It was the first industry to close its doors and the last to open. But this Martin Feller from the FAC, it continues, as well as a bit of drop off in some of the older audiences returning to live shows. However, despite stagnant fees and shrinking audiences, touring activity in the UK is at its peak due to the costs of touring in Europe, which can be thousands in taxes and car net alone. 74% fewer UK bands now touring in Europe post Brexit. It's much more difficult to tour in Europe, so there are more artists trying to perform domestically, says Martin. That creates a saturation problem. Yeah, I mean, if everyone's touring, I mean, punters, people who attend gigs, music fans, people who are passionate about music at the low to mid level, and even at the higher level, excuse me, only have so much disposable income to facilitate that interest and that passion. And especially if you've got bands touring on a domestic level or playing shows at domestic level, you know, you are now competing for that audience, which means the venues are going to go with the safe bet. They're going to go with the band that can pull the most people, especially with the promoters. You know, the Straits are in a unique situation because we did have a handful of shows under our belts before the pandemic, so we had some mileage in regards to that. But you know, during the pandemic, we attained lots of FM radio airplay. So when we came on the other side, we had some sort of credential to bargain with to you know to get those live shows. But I could not fathom uh, trying to start a band now from scratch and trying to get these shows. I wouldn't know how, because if bands are struggling at a higher level than you, you know, I sort of perish the thought. Right, let's continue with this article. For this article, The Guardian has seen 12 tour budget sheets for various bands and artists, varying from up-and-comers to firmly established and successful acts, all of whom regularly undertake headline tours across the UK in venues ranging from 150 cap to 200 for 2,500 capacity. Excuse me. Almost all of these result in losses. Understandably, most shared their balance sheets on the condition of being anonymous. One four-piece indie band whose last two albums went top 10 in the UK charts reported a loss of £2,885 from a 6-day UK tour. Wow, I mean, I struggle to comprehend how that's how you know how. But I know I'm talking from a position of naivety, because you know we're at a level now where we still play regionally, and I think we've played London and Hastings and gone quite a few places. But ideally, you know, any band who's starting up, you really need to make a name in your hometown or a certain area before you can start venturing out. But you know, to lose £2,885 from a 6-day UK tour, when you know when your last two records have gone in the top 10 album chart in the UK. I'd love to know sort of the financial situation in regards to those budget sheets, because I find it unfathomable to lose that. You know, that's a terrible loss, especially if you're trying to um, create that momentum as a band. We will proceed. The only tour that shows anything resembling a healthy profit was a 29-date tour for a solo artist who came away with £6,550. Not bad going for a month's work, but as Martin points out, that's then his touring done for the next 6 months, so it's not enough money. Um, this is very interesting in regards to where we go from here, because obviously people don't buy records or the physical media in the traditional sense. Obviously, you'll find record collectors, vinyl collections, people who feel strongly and passionate about music that will add to their collection and seek out new artists. But there's a lot of people who aren't like that, and ideally, especially recently in the last number of years, about half a decade perhaps, maybe a bit more, um, that's where people really recovered their financial sort of hemorrhaging of their traditional record sales, was to go and play live. And the fact that you have numerous examples of artists who are struggling to even break even, that's wild to me. And yet again, I speak from a position of naivety. So we will continue this last a bit of the article. I will include the article in the description below, as well as the Straits socials, and you'll find our music on Spotify, Apple Music, and Bandcamp. Do go check that out and subscribe and like this video. Now, the next name of the artist that's included in this article is a 9-piece Afro jazz outfit whose band name I'll probably murder the pronunciation of, but is Nubian Twist. Apologies in advance, because the likelihood I've butchered that is about 99%. They have a loyal following of tens of millions of streams on Spotify. And quote, "We pride ourselves on being able to put on a big show, you know, like James Brown, these epic spectacles," says band leader Tom Excel. But it's getting more difficult, without a shadow of a doubt, for an upcoming eight-show tour of Europe. They are predicting a loss of £4,931.28. The only way we can justify doing it is because they get funding from the BPI Music Export Growth Scheme. You know, so they're being subsidised to, you know, continue their creative endeavour. Good luck to them. I would have pulled the plug if it wasn't for that, says Excel. I've got a 2-year-old and I can't be away from home for that long and come back with a loss. I mean, that's just the reality people are facing. Eventually, you know, if you can't tour domestically, you know, if the costs and the outgoings of touring Europe as a result of post-Brexit sort of legal red tape, as you would call it, are sort of strangling bands' opportunity to go overseas. I will say though, there's a band in particular who we saw at the Wedgwood Rooms called October Drift. They tour Europe quite a lot, as well as a band we opened up for recently called the Luke Estate. So, you know, some bands are doing it, I suppose, and I know that the venues in Europe pay a lot more handsomely than those in the UK. Maybe it's because of the situation where, from my understanding, and please write in the comments if I'm incorrect on this, is that there is some form of tax where the bigger venues pay, and basically there's a bit of trickle down economics going, where it comes down to, or basically the tax is subsidising the local music venues, so bands at a smaller level can, you know, perform their songs. Well, we'll continue because it's literally the last bit of this. I say that. We'll end it here, and I'll just add the article in the description. Even when the band gets more lucrative fees for festivals, it's still tough. They'll be paid £5,000 for a festival performance this summer, but the total profit of the band wages, as Excel pays all his band members in full first, expenses and commissions are paid out, will be about £277.60. Quote, "After 4 albums and 15 years doing this, to still be having to gamble on whether I'll be going to make anything or anyone gets paid a guaranteed amount is a struggle," admits Excel. Such thin margins leave little wiggle room, as the Space Surf band Japanese Television, who headline 100 to 300 capacity venues, found out when their booking agent reduced their 13-day UK and EU tour to 8 shows with a 5-day gap in the middle. That will add a further loss of £1,200 to a tour that is already set to lose a £700. Blimey. Quote, "Records and t-shirts are basically what keep us going," says the band's Tim Jones. "The only way this tour is working for us is because we just put out our second album and we did about 60 pre-sales on the vinyl, and that's basically enough to pay for the van. It's a hobby that just pays for itself." So we'll wrap it up there, and, you know, we'll talk essentially about, you know, the conclusion of this article and what we take away from it. You know, the competition is significantly fierce now. Labels, you know, don't really, especially on the higher end. I mean, there's some fantastic independent labels which sort of normally take my interest in. I'm more intrigued about what they're doing. The bigger labels are still looking for the global superstars and still trying to understand and navigate the modern industry. And there's obviously this massive emphasis on social media now. Uh, Social media is a fantastic tool. I mean, I'm talking to you, trying to expand the Straits reach, doing this video, but you know, does it open the door for people to discover you? Yeah, sure, but will people buy tickets and merch? You know, you only hope so. I mean, that's the only thing you can do. And in regards to the saturation problem in the UK, yeah, I mean, this pretty much covers everything. The costs are getting a lot higher, and we're very lucky that um, because a band needs to be able to cut its teeth on stage, especially if you're in a situation where you want to be playing these festivals and you want to be doing these opening slots. A band really does have to have stage time just to understand, the trade, the tools of the trade. You got to know how to speak to an audience. And the Straits have been in a situation where we've played to 7 people. We've played to 12 people. We've played to one person, and then fast forward 6 months and we've played to 400 people. But you know, uh, that's that's the training you go through. And if people, if you can't even get a situation where you can't um, even get a tidy sum just to go for your next recording, um, especially when you've got bands on major labels stating this. I mean, as I said earlier, you know, bands on major labels, there is this illusion that it'll be life changing. Obviously, it is in terms of your opportunity, but your individual circumstances pretty much remain the same. And do check out English Teacher. I really enjoyed what I heard of theirs, and I had seen their name uh, quite often because if you're gigging these venues and you're looking at the tour posters or the upcoming events, they're working hard, and fair play to them. And I wish them all the best in their creative pursuit, and hopefully the next record is blossoms even further success. But I mean, it does sort of put a dampener on your own aspirations. But obviously, if you're headstrong like us, you're in a situation where you look at a band like Wet Leg. I mean, they had two breakthrough singles, Chaise Lounge and Wet Dream. And nothing against Wet Leg, I do like them, but you can't expect everyone to sing about furniture and cum. That's just the reality of it. But they're one of those bands that signed to Domino, independent band. You know, they worked hard, they played the venues. Fair play to them. Bands like Wolf Alice or Soft Play. There's numerous bands, especially in the UK scene, um, that have gone down that road. But my interest is particularly in America. Bands like Bass Drum of Death, who are one of my favorite bands of all time, and Night Beats. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you enjoyed this video, if you've got any thoughts about what this article contains, I do recommend that you read the rest of it because it's a real eye opener and an education. And I'm always willing to learn about from other people's experiences. And give this video a subscribe, give this video or just give this channel a subscribe, give this video a like, and do check out our music. And thank you very much for watching this.